Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to judicial accountability, as there is an allegation that a huge pile of cash was discovered at the residence of a Delhi High Court justice. The second article is related to genetically modified crops, as the Department of Biotechnology is working towards the introduction of GM food crops in India. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles under the simplified, which will be helpful for your prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to judicial accountability. The context behind it is that there is an allegation that a huge pile of cash has been discovered at the residence of a Delhi High Court justice. The Vice President of India took this opportunity to highlight the need for a National Judicial Appointments Commission and to ensure judicial accountability. So we will discuss the concept of judicial accountability, the need for ensuring the same, the challenges in ensuring judicial discipline in India, the measures to ensure judicial discipline in India and globally, and a few suggestions in this regard. This is important in GS2 under the topic Structure, Organization and Functioning of the Judiciary. Let's start with the opinions of a few scholars first. In the words of Saint Augustine, states without justice are but bands of robbers enlarged. Because justice is a prerequisite in a modern state, more so in a democratic state. Therefore, the 3 organs of the state must be accountable. Executive is accountable to the parliament is accountable to the electorate can choose a new ruling party in the upcoming elections. Likewise, theoretically, judiciary is accountable to the parliament because the judges can be impeached. Therefore, the cult of robes in the judiciary must yield to the command of a democratic discipline. To borrow the words of Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer, a justice known for impeccable integrity, the iron curtain of the contempt of court will not be able to silence the populace when the time for storming the Bastille arrives. The storming of Bastille in France led to the French Revolution. Therefore, judiciary must ensure accountability. And judicial accountability is integral to the very moral survival of the Republic in the words of Lusky. In India, judiciary also upholds the constitutional morality. Therefore, in the words of Jeremy Bentham, it must ensure the transparency, openness. It should not be clouded in a cloak of secrecy, in an opaque cloak. In the darkness of secrecy, sinister interest and evil has full swing. Therefore, publicity is the very soul of justice. Likewise, in the words of Bacon, judges ought to be more learned than witty, more reverent than plausible, and more advised than confident. Above all, integrity is their proper virtue. And now, the judiciary has to uphold the rights of not only the individuals, but also the convicts as well. Because in the words of Justice Frank, hands-off doctrine is now obsolete. Hands-off doctrine was a doctrine which was in vogue in USA earlier. It meant that the judiciary did not interfere in the functioning of the correctional system. That the prison system, the correctional system was administrating regarding the reform of the prisoners. The judiciary assumed that the rights of the convicts did not follow them to the prison and it did not interfere in the functioning of the prisons. Therefore, when we look at the Indian ethos, it accords the judge a very high pedestal. As per Srimad Bhagavad Gita, a judge is a person bestowed with excellence. Likewise, the Hindu philosophy compares the judge with a flower whose fragrance never dies, which never withers. We can understand this analogy with the help of an anecdote. A religious discussion was to take place between Adi Shankaracharya and Mandan Mishra. Sharda was to be the judge. Sharda brought 2 garlands of flowers, both identical, and put them around the neck of the 2 scholars and said that the flowers will be the judge. Whose garland withers away first, the flowers wither away first, will be deemed to have lost that religious discussion. Because The person who will have a clear intellectual capability, logical reasoning, self-confidence, his voice will be like a cool breeze, ensuring that the flowers keep on blossoming. Whereas the person who does not have clear thinking capability, who does not have sound logic, will become frustrated, and naturally his breath will become erratic and hot, and the flowers will wither away sooner. Therefore, the judges are compared to the flowers which never wither in the Indian philosophy. Likewise, as per the Sukra Niti, there are 5 vices against which the judges have to guard themselves. They are Rag, that they should not be biased in favor of a party; Lobh, that they should not have greed; Bhay, that they should not be afraid in giving decisions; Dvesh, that they should not harbor any ill will; and Vadinosh Rahashruti, which means that they must not conduct any hearing in absence of another party in secret. It is having analogy to a principle of natural justice also, that is, both parties must be heard before adjudicating a dispute, odi alteram partem as it is known. Now, why do we need judicial accountability? Because the judiciary enjoys public trust in India, and it must not be eroded through allegations. There are allegations, for example, the judiciary resorts to the practice of seeking sealed envelope, information in sealed envelope. For example, in the cases of former CBI chief Alok Verma, in the allegation of scam in the 2G spectrum allocation, in the case of BCCI, etc. But it should be used only in exceptional circumstances. Justice Chelmeshwar had opined that we should use this practice of seeking information in sealed envelope only in 2 cases. Either when it is a dispute related to 2 parties in the family dispute nature, or a matrimonial dispute where privacy is a concern, or if the information will be dangerous for the national security if it is leaked. Likewise, in 1991, there were allegations against Justice Ramaswamy of misappropriating funds while he was the Chief Justice of Punjab High Court. The inquiry committee found the justice guilty also, but a party backed out when the impeachment proceeding was going on in the parliament, and the Justice Ramaswamy was never impeached. In the Prasad medical case, there was an allegation against Justice S.N. Shukla that he received favor from a retired justice and the chairman of a trust in exchange for giving a favorable judgment. Likewise, in 2018, 4 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court held a press conference in which they alleged that the administrative functioning of the Supreme Court is unjust. Likewise, a few years back, there was the case of a female employee of the Supreme Court leveling sexual harassment allegations against the then Chief Justice of India. In that case, the Attorney General of India had recommended that an external committee should be set up, but the then Chief Justice of India went ahead and set up a committee of judges himself. Plus, the judicial accountability is vital. It is non-paralleled because it ensures the rule of law, which is a basic feature in upholding the constitution, and to ensure that the public has the confidence in the judges, in the institution, and the institution fulfills its responsibility. Now, what are the canons of judicial ethics in India? The persuasive measures to ensure judicial discipline in India. In 1997, the Supreme Court adopted the restatement of values in judicial life. As per these values, justice must not only be done, it must also be seen to be done. Therefore, the judges should be mindful of their behavior, the conduct, especially in open court and behind closed doors also. They should not contest any elections so that they do not appear biased. They should maintain a certain degree of aloofness. They should not be sitting in judgment in those cases where their family or a relative or a friend is the litigant or a counsel. Likewise, they should recuse from those cases where they have a conflict of interest, where they themselves have an interest as a party. And they should not engage in public debate ordinarily. They should avoid giving interviews to the media, and they should not accept gifts. They should not seek financial benefit in exchange for giving judgments, and they should not engage in the speculation in trading stocks, etc. Likewise, the judiciary adopted the Bangalore Principles of Judicial Conduct, That is, they should ensure judicial independence, which is necessary for ensuring rule of law, to ensure free and fair trial in India. They should ensure judicial impartiality, integrity, propriety, equality, the competence and diligence while giving decisions. Likewise, the oath which the judges take, mentioned in the third schedule to the Constitution, is also functioning as a beacon. The oath ensures that the judges bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution. They are supposed to hold the sovereignty and integrity of the country. There are certain coercive measures also which can be used for disciplining judges in India. For example, judiciary can itself take action against the erring judges. For example, Justice C.S. Karnan, the Calcutta High Court Justice, was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment for the contempt of court by the Supreme Court. That was an exceptional measure. Likewise, the Supreme Court can transfer the erring judges also. The Supreme Court Collegium transfers the judges of the high courts in case there are allegations, as is done in the present case also. But in the transfers also, there are a series of judgments protecting the judges. For example, in Union of India versus Sankalchand Himmanlal Seth, the court had observed that the transfer of high court judges is an exceptional measure. It should not be used as a way of punishment. Rather, it should be used only in the public interest. Likewise, there is an in-house judicial inquiry mechanism also, which was put in place in 1999. Through this, the Chief Justice of India can seek the response from the concerned judge against whom the allegations have been leveled. If the response from the alleged judge is unsatisfactory, then the Chief Justice of India can form a panel for the inquiry. This panel will consist of 1 Supreme Court judge and 2 Chief Justices of the High Courts other than the High Court in which the concerned judge is functioning. Likewise, the judiciary can resort to censure also in case there is serious misconduct. That is, the Chief Justice of India can recommend the judge to either take voluntary retirement or to resign. If the concerned judge does not resign, refuses to resign, then the Chief Justice of India can cease the work allocation to that concerned judge. He may not allocate any judicial work to him. Let's also have a look at the measures that the other countries take to ensure judicial accountability, to tackle the corruption in judiciary. In England, there is a Judicial Appointments Commission. It functions as the investigation body in case there are allegations of corruption against a judge, and if the allegations are found to be true, then the legislature removes the judges. In Canada, there are 2 oversight panel members and appointee of the Justice Minister who are functioning as the investigative body, and the judges are removed by the legislature in case there are true allegations of corruption. Likewise, in USA, there is the Judicial Council. In France, there is an oversight panel which can remove the judges also in case they have engaged in corrupt activities. In Germany, there is the Federal Constitutional Court which can remove the judges. Apart from that, in Germany, as per the Section 77 of the Judges Act 1972, the tribunals are also established which oversee the inquiries in case there are allegations of corruption against the judges. In USA, the American Bar Association has put in place a Model Code of Judicial Conduct 1990. In Lithuania, there is the Judicial Ethics and Discipline Commission and the Judicial Court of Honor ensuring judicial discipline there. Also, there are the United Nations Basic Principles on the Independence of Judiciary 1985 which were adopted, and they include the provisions for ensuring judicial accountability and discipline as well. But there are certain challenges in ensuring judicial discipline in India. For example, the conduct of a Supreme Court judge cannot be discussed in the Parliament as per Article 121 except when a motion for his removal is pending in the Parliament. Likewise, the conduct of a High Court judge cannot be discussed in a state legislative assembly except when a motion for his removal is pending. Plus, the removal can happen through the impeachment proceedings mentioned under Article 124 subclause 4 of the Constitution and as per the Judges Inquiry Act. But these proceedings are quite lengthy and tedious. For example, it has to originate through either house. For that, a signed notice of 50 members of Rajya Sabha or 100 members of Lok Sabha is required. It is given to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha or Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. The Speaker or the Chairman can accept or refuse that notice. If it is refused by the Speaker or Chairman, the motion is dropped then and there. If it is accepted, then the Speaker or Chairman sets up a 3-member committee. The 3-member committee comprises of a Supreme Court judge, a Chief Justice of a High Court, and a distinguished jurist. This committee frames the charges. A copy of these go to the judge also, who is facing the allegation. The judge can submit a written defense as well, and the final report is submitted to the Speaker or the Chairman. Then this issue is taken up for debate in the Parliament. In the Parliament, it has to be passed by special majority, that is the majority of the total membership of the House and 2/3 of the members present and voting. After that, it is forwarded to the other house. There also it has to be passed through a special majority. Then it is forwarded to the President, and the President issues an order for the removal of that judge. Plus, the grounds of the removal, that is proved misbehavior and incapacity, they have not been defined. Therefore, the known serious instances of judicial misconduct, for example, allegations of indiscipline, bias, etc., they do not meet that threshold requirement of the removal through impeachment. Therefore, no provisions to punish for them. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give for ensuring judicial accountability in India? One, we can establish a National Judicial Council. This may oversee the investigation, the inquiry of allegations under the Judges Inquiry Act, and we can establish a Judicial Oversight Committee. This was recommended by the Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill as well. That bill provided that there should be a procedure for complaint by any person also, not only a reference by the Parliament. This should go to an Oversight Committee, and if the Oversight Committee is getting the complaint from any person, then there should be a scrutiny panel as well. If it is coming through a reference by the Parliament, then it should directly go to the Investigation Committee. And if the Investigation Committee finds the judge to be not guilty, then no further action should be taken. But if the judge is found to be guilty but does not deserve removal, then the committee should be able to issue advisories or warnings. And if the committee finds the judge guilty and deserving removal, then the Oversight Committee should be able to recommend the removal of the judge to the President. Additionally, we can put in place a code of conduct. A code of conduct which ensures the behavior of the justices, the ethical standards that they should strive to ensure, and the procedures for addressing the violations. We can put in place a judicial performance evaluation framework as well, to ensure that the disposal rates are sufficient and they adhere to the ethical standards. The feedback can be taken from all the quarters, including the fellow justices and maybe the jurists and the lawyers who are practicing, the standing lawyers in the bar. A mandatory declaration of assets and liabilities should also be done by the justices. In the concluding remarks, we can say that the power usually corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, but we have to trust someone. So in the words of Lord Denning, someone must be trusted. Let it be the judges. There is a mains practice question as well. Discuss the mechanisms of judicial accountability in India, analyze the challenges faced in ensuring it, and suggest measures to address these challenges while maintaining the independence of the judiciary. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to genetically modified crops. The context behind it is that the Department of Biotechnology is working to introduce GM food crops in India, though the matter is still sub judice and the Supreme Court will be hearing petitions in this regard. So we will discuss the GM crops, the benefits of the GM crops, the issues with them, and the way forward. This is important in GS3 under the topics biotechnology and agriculture in economy. The GM crops are those crops which are using genetically modified organisms. As per the World Health Organization, GM crops use the genetic material which is altered in a way that does not occur naturally by mating or through natural recombination. That is, the researchers, they usually isolate a gene from an organism which has those traits which are needed. They want to impart those traits to a plant. So a single gene is isolated and modified. This gene is copied, many copies of this gene are made and they are inserted into the plant cells and they are induced to grow. And the seeds from the mature plants are studied whether the transformation has been successful or not. Therefore, the GM crops can be formed through mutation of genes, insertion of genes, or deletion of genes. BT cotton is one of the widely grown GM crop in India. In 2002-03, less than 1% of the cotton grown in India was BT cotton. Now it is more than 90%. The BT cotton releases certain BT toxins. The GM crops, they release certain GM toxins, genetically modified toxins. They function as insecticides for the larvae of the moths, the bollworms. Therefore, the cotton crop is protected from the attacks of the larvae of the moths and bollworms, etc. Also, the yield of the cotton crop has increased ever since the adoption of BT cotton. It has reportedly been doubled. Likewise, the cost of growing cotton has come down because when we grow the BT cotton, then the insecticides needed are much lesser. Therefore, the insecticides cost come down. But simultaneously, the seed cost increases because the BT cotton seeds are costlier. But at the same time, there is the problem of whitefly attack. Even in the BT cotton, it has been observed in the states of Punjab, Haryana, and other northern states. At the same time, we experimented with the BT brinjal as well. The BT brinjal has resistance to the brinjal fruit and shoot borer, which was damaging the brinjal crop. This was even cleared by the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, which functions under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in 2009. But a moratorium was imposed on the commercial use of BT brinjal because of the protests from activists. Although the BT brinjal is commercially grown in Bangladesh. Then there is the case of DMH11 mustard. The DMH11 mustard, which is GM mustard, also got the recommendation of the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee and the approval from the Ministry of Environment and Forest also in 2022. But the status quo has been restored by the Supreme Court because again there were protests against the adoption of genetically modified crops in the food crops especially. Although the genetically modified food crops have already entered our food chain. For example, the consumption of soybean oil, some of that is imported and some of that is genetically modified soybean. Now, what are the benefits of the GM crops? One, it increases the crop yield. For example, the doubling of the BT cotton yield as compared to the conventional cotton, and they can produce higher yields per acre addressing food security therefore. Likewise, it can ensure pest resistance. They can be engineered to resist the pests and diseases, therefore reducing the need for chemical pesticides. They can ensure that we sail through the problem of climate change because the GM crops, they can be designed to withstand drought conditions, enhancing resilience in the arid regions. They can ensure that we gain the benefits of an evergreen revolution. They ensure that we can have better nutritional quality. The nutritional enhancement of the crops can be done. The nutritional content such as increasing the vitamin or protein levels in the crops through genetic modification. The shelf life of the crops can be increased through genetic modification, reducing food wastage during storage and transportation. Likewise, they can promote the environmental benefits also by reducing the environmental impact of the farming practices. For example, too much spray of the insecticides and pesticides. But there are certain issues with the genetically modified crops. One, it can lead to a health risk. The genes of the genetically modified crops can be transferred to the humans, especially if it leads to the transfer of antibiotic resistant genes. It will cause a major health scare. Likewise, the yield does not necessarily increase. For the initial few years, it does increase. After that, it has been observed to decline as well in some cases. Then the patent laws, they are usually monopolistic in nature. That the major seed making companies, they are favored by the patent laws and they are allowed to launch the terminator seeds which cannot be used to grow the crops again. So with every crop season, the farmers have to purchase the seeds again from the seed companies. Likewise, the resistance may be developed by the pathogens as well. For example, the pink bollworm attack. Like it can cause the various kinds of allergies also. the generation of various allergies in humans, and it can lead to unintended cross-pollination as well. That is, the cross-pollination with the other conventional crops, which can cause a food security scare as well. Plus, the biodiversity concerns also need to be alleviated when it comes to the usage of genetically modified crops, because certain known target organisms may also be susceptible when the GM crops are used. For example, the bees, the butterflies, they may be targeted unintendedly through the usage of genetically modified crops. Plus, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, its composition also needs to be sorted. It has a bureaucratic dominance. Plus, the data it relies upon is solely given by the producers, by the technology developer, by the person, the company which has developed the genetically modified crop. Plus, the public perception regarding the genetically modified crops is negative. It also needs to be sorted out by spreading awareness regarding GM crops. And in some countries, even the labeling of the crops, whether it is GM or non-GM, is not even mandatory, which can cause confusion. And there is an illegal cultivation also at times of the GM crops. For example, the BT brinjal HT cotton was grown by some farmers in Maharashtra, although it is not allowed. The commercial growth is not allowed. Plus, the genetically modified organisms, they are already in the food chain. For example, there is the consumption of cotton seed oil, which is derived from BT cotton in Gujarat and Maharashtra. Likewise, the consumption of soybean oil, some of that imported in the form of GM soybean. In 2024, the Supreme Court came up with the judgment in Gene Campaign versus Union of India, saying that the central government should come up with a national policy on genetically modified crops after a consultation with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And they should comply with the Section 23 of the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, the Act of 2006, if the genetically modified food is imported. Regarding the approval given by the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee for the commercial release of the GM mustard, there was a split verdict, because Justice Nagaratna observed that the precautionary principle was not followed. This is the case of introducing genetically modification in food crops. There we must be having more caution. Now, what can be the way forward regarding the adoption of genetically modified crops in India? One, we can establish a Biotechnology Regulatory Authority of India, through which the approvals of GM crops must be sought. And the patent regime must be proactive and neutral. It should not be biased towards corporates, towards the seed production companies. It should also take into account the rights of the farmers and their plight, their distress as well. Likewise, the consultation must be transparent. The rules, if made, they should be made after consulting the scientists, the civil society and the stakeholders. Plus, we can ensure the effective implementation of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety to the Convention on Biodiversity 2003 to ensure that the handling, transport and usage of genetically modified organisms is done safely, and the implementation of the Biological Diversity Act 2002 to ensure conservation, sustainable use and fair and equitable sharing of the biodiversity in India. Now, there is a mains practice question as well. Analyze the need for GM crops in India. Discuss the associated issues such as the ecological impact, health concerns and the socio-economic implications, and suggest a way forward for their regulated use. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to the geopolitics of Sudan. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries. Before coming to the article, let's have a brief overview regarding Sudan. Sudan is located in North Africa. It shares a boundary with the Red Sea. It shares its boundaries with Egypt, Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Ethiopia and Eritrea. Sudan has been under the military rule for more than 3 decades. Earlier it was Omar al-Bashir and it was a brutal regime. He even employed the Janjaweed militia, a brutal militia in Sudan. In 2011, the South Sudan seceded itself from Sudan, and therefore 75% of Khartoum oil resources were lost to South Sudan, and the revenues of Sudan were hit. Therefore, they sought investments. They sought investments from the UAE, United Arab Emirates. The UAE invested there because Sudan has oil resources, it has agriculture potential because it has fertile land through the Nile River. And in 2019, General Burhan, who heads the Sudan Air Force, also the military, and General Dagalo, who heads the Rapid Support Forces, set up a civilian military combined rule. But in 2021, the military was toppled. After this, General Burhan wanted a transition to the civilian rule. But General Dagalo refused from this, and he did not want a merger of the Rapid Support Forces with the military, because the General Dagalo had sent his men to the UAE, to the Saudi Arabia in fighting against the Yemen Houthi rebels, because the Iran-backed Houthi rebels were fighting in Yemen and the Saudi Arabia and the UAE were fighting against them. General Dagalo sent his men there to fight against the Houthi rebels. In return, he received large amounts of money from Saudi Arabia and UAE. He received this money and utilized it for strengthening his paramilitary forces, and therefore the Rapid Support Forces were strengthened. He did not want its merger with the military, therefore. And the two forces, the Sudan military and the Rapid Support Forces, ranged against each other. There was a ceasefire in 2023 temporarily. During that ceasefire, various countries evacuated their personals. India also evacuated Indians through the Operation Kaveri. And this fighting between the Sudan military and the Rapid Support Forces continued. Now, what are the powers at play in Sudan? Sudan is placed strategically. Its strategic location gives it access to the Red Sea. It gives it access to the Nile River also. Also, it has vast swathes of gold reserves, agriculture potential through the Nile River. Therefore, USA wants it to transition to a civilian rule. Russia is also involved there, not directly, but through the Wagner Group militia. It trains the Rapid Support Forces also because it wants to build a naval base in Port Sudan. China is also involved because China has investments in Sudan to the tune of $3 billion in petroleum sector. Likewise, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, they back General Burhan, but UAE is closer to the Rapid Support Forces. India is therefore in a dilemma because the Saudi Arabia and UAE, they both are supporting opposing factions. Now, what are India's interests in Sudan? One, we have civilizational ties. There was trade between the Nile Valley civilization and the Indus Valley civilization ever since the ancient times. And India also has investments to the tune of $3 billion. And there is a significant Indian diaspora also in Sudan. There is the community from Saurashtra which settled there a century ago. And India wants to ensure that it expands its influence in the North Africa, near the Horn of Africa. And if there are any happenings in Sudan, it will not be contained within Sudan. Whatever happens in Sudan, it will not stay within Sudan. It will have potential spillovers in Chad, in South Sudan, and potentially in the entire North African region. Therefore, India wants regional stability and peace. Now, coming to the article, Sudan's military said that it has taken again the Republican Palace in Khartoum, the last heavily guarded bastion of the rival paramilitary forces in the capital after nearly 2 years of fighting. The seizure of this Republican Palace, which is surrounded by government ministries, represent a major symbolic victory for the Sudan's military. However, it does not mean that the war has ended, as the Rapid Support Forces, they hold territory in Sudan's western Darfur region and elsewhere also in Sudan. Now, the next article is related to the designation as a senior advocate. This is important in GS2 under the topic Judiciary. Before coming to the article, the senior advocates are those advocates who are designated under Section 16 of the Advocates Act 1961. The power to designate advocates as senior advocates is given to the High Courts and to the Supreme Court. This designation can be given with the consent of that advocate. As per the Advocates Amendment Act in 1973, additional conditions were given that the advocate should have the ability and standing at the bar, and the advocate should have special knowledge or experience in law. Therefore, the senior advocates can be those persons who are having 10 years standing as an advocate, or combined 10 years standing as an advocate or as a district and session judge, or the combined standing as an advocate or a judicial member of any tribunal in the state for 10 years. Now they can be designated as senior advocates if they have a minimum age of 45 years, although this age criteria can be relaxed by the committee which designates the advocates as senior advocates. But there are certain restrictions which are imposed upon the senior advocates. The senior advocates cannot appear without an advocate on record in the Supreme Court or without an advocate in any other court. The senior advocates cannot accept instructions to draft pleadings, to draft affidavits, or to do any kind of drafting work. The senior advocates cannot accept directly from a client any briefing or instructions. The briefing and instructions have to be received by the junior advocates. They will further brief the senior advocate to appear in any court or tribunal. Now, there are a couple of cases whereby the mechanism to designate an advocate as a senior advocate was also put in place. Through the Indira Jaising versus Supreme Court judgment in 2017, the court set up a permanent selection committee. This selection committee will give points to each individual advocate. Based upon that point system, the advocate can be designated as a senior advocate. These will be dependent upon the parameters including the number of years of practice, the number of years of experience of that advocate, the judgment's legal formulations, advances, pro bono work that the advocate has done, the domain expertise, etc. The publications, whether he has published any research papers in legal journals, and the personality displayed in the interview that is conducted by the permanent selection committee. This criteria was further refined in the second Indira Jaising case in Indira Jaising versus Supreme Court of India in 2023. The court observed that 1 point can be given for each year of experience between 10 to 20 years for the designation as senior advocate in that calculation, and the voting should happen in the permanent selection committee through open voting, not secret ballot. And the publications which are given by the advocate should be awarded 5 points only. Earlier they were given 20 points, and the young advocates can also be given a shot, can also be given a chance to be designated as senior advocates in exceptional circumstances. Now coming to the article, the Supreme Court is learned to have issued a show cause notice to a senior advocate, Rishi Malhotra, asking him to explain why his senior designation should not be withdrawn, should not be revoked. Because he had appeared in a case of premature release of convicts which was represented by him, and there he had made some incorrect statements and suppressed the facts. Although later on he tendered an unconditional apology for the same, but the Supreme Court usually relies upon the statements given by the senior advocates, and the senior counsel accepted that he should have verified the facts that he has stated in the special leave petition filed under Article 136, and he accepted that he was not diligent and tendered the apology. Therefore, the court, while issuing the order, has stated that it raises an important question of whether the decisions of this court in the case of Indira Jaising 1 and Indira Jaising 2, which lay down the guidelines for designation of senior advocates, need reconsideration. Now, the next article is related to the new surrender policy for the Maoists put in place by the government of Chhattisgarh. This is important in GS3 under the topic linkages between development and spread of extremism. Before coming to the policy enacted by the Chhattisgarh government, let us also discuss the guidelines of Ministry of Home Affairs put in place for the surrender cum rehab of the Naxalites. In the guidelines issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs, the persons who are eligible for the surrender cum rehabilitation include those who surrender with or without arms, and those persons are scrutinized by a screening cum rehabilitation committee. They can be given aid if they surrender. The aid can be a monthly stipend of up to rupees 2,000. This stipend may be given for up to 3 years, that is 36 months. Additionally, they can be given 1.5 lakh rupees. This will be given as a fixed deposit that they can use in future. This will be a fixed deposit for 3 years that can be used for self-employment creation later on as well. Also, the incentives are given if they surrender the arms, they surrender the weapons. The cash rewards are given for the surrendered weapons or ammunition. For example, 15,000 rupees is given if AK-47 rifle is surrendered, or 25,000 rupees is given if sniper rifles are surrendered by the Maoists. Likewise, the incentives are deposited as fixed deposit for 3 years. Additionally, legal support should be given to the surrendering Maoists. For example, if they have committed any minor offenses, then plea bargaining should be allowed. Likewise, there should be free legal aid provided to them, and there should be fast-track courts to ensure that the trials for the Maoists are conducted speedily. As security measures, they should be provided immediate protection, the persons who surrender, and if the weapons are also surrendered, then they should be stored in a safe storage. There is a screening process also which is mentioned in the guidelines of Ministry of Home Affairs, that the screening should be done and verification should be done by the state appointed committees and the security forces, and the decision on whether the surrender is accepted or not should be taken within 15 days of the surrender. Now coming to the new surrender and rehabilitation policy of the Chhattisgarh government, it provides the red rebels the provisions of free food, shelter, cash, skills, land and a home as well. The Chhattisgarh government provides that the district level committee is set up to determine whether the person surrendering is indeed a Maoist. For 3 years, shelter and food will be free. They will receive 10,000 rupees per month and will undergo skill development, will get land and home under the Prime Minister Housing Scheme. They will get extra benefits for bringing weapons, and they will also get a bounty amount they have on their arrest in case they surrender. For mass surrenders, the reward will be doubled. A Gram Panchayat that is declared Maoist free will have development projects initiated to the tune of 1 crore immediately. It will be sanctioned. The village will get a mobile network, electric line, and in the meantime solar light as long as the electric line is not established. This is being done to ensure mass surrenders. There are provisions for the married couples and for their children also. Under the new rehabilitation policy, the state will be sponsoring the education of the children who have lost the parents to Naxal violence. Those displaced due to Naxalism will also be getting monetary aid as well as land under the new surrender cum rehabilitation policy for the Maoists in Chhattisgarh. Now, the next article is related to Section 79 of the IT Act. This is important in GS2 under the topic governance. Government has been using Section 79 Clause 3 Clause B for content removal from the social media platforms. It is alleged that it bypasses the safeguards which are mentioned under Section 69A. Section 69A governs the content moderation now. Because the Section 66A of the IT Act was struck down by the Supreme Court. In Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of the IT Act, saying that it is unconstitutional because it is putting vague restrictions upon the freedom of speech and expression under Article 19, Clause 1, Clause A. Therefore, the resort left for the government was to resort to Section 69A. The Section 69A allows content blocking, but there are safeguards. The safeguards include that the blocking must be necessary under Article 19 Clause 2, because the freedom of speech and expression can only be restricted based upon the reasonable restrictions contained within the Constitution under Article 19 Clause 2. For example, it can be restricted if it affects the public order, decency or morality, the security of the state, friendly relations with other countries, etc. Likewise, the reasons for the content blocking must also be recorded for the judicial review. Now, the third parties, they publish content on the intermediary websites, the social media platforms. But the intermediaries like X, formerly known as Twitter, they are exempt from liability for the third party content. But through the Section 79 Clause 3 Clause B, the intermediaries must remove content upon the government notification or court order. But as per the Shreya Singhal versus Union of India ruling, the Section 79 Clause 3 Clause B applies only after the court order or a government notification under Article 19 Clause 2, which provides for the reasonable restrictions upon free speech. Now, it has been alleged that the government has been using Section 79, Clause 3, Clause B to issue directives for content blocking. For example, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology issued the directive in 2023 allowing the blocking orders under this section. In 2024, the Sayog portal was also unveiled, which enables the authorities to issue and upload the blocking orders. Now, what is the legal arguments of X, the formerly known as Twitter? It argues that the government bypasses the safeguards under Section 69A. The content censorship must follow Section 69A or the court orders. Therefore, Section 79 should not be used for creating an unlawful blocking regime. There is the controversy regarding the Grok AI. X's AI chatbot Grok 3 has been criticized for using Hindi slang and anti-government responses. Now, this has raised questions whether the Section 79 applies to AI generated content also, and whether the AI responses qualify as the third party content, because there is exemption to the intermediaries only for the third party content. Now, the next article is related to a weaker dollar. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developing and Developed Countries on India's Interests. President Trump of USA has been claiming that dollar is overvalued since 2017, and he has been blaming it for America's trade deficit, which is more than $1 trillion now. He also blames it for the flight of the manufacturing industries abroad. He wants to set up manufacturing industries within USA. He wants to make USA as a manufacturing superpower. When we look at the current economic context, the trade deficit of USA is more than $1 trillion for the fourth consecutive year, although the employment is at a historically low level. So the goal of Trump is to boost manufacturing, not specifically a focus upon the jobs. So what is the role of dollar's strength in this? A strong dollar will ensure a high purchasing power of the Americans. Therefore, the imports for the Americans will be cheaper. Therefore, the domestic manufacturing will be discouraged because the domestic manufacturing will be costly, imports will be cheaper. And the dollar is globally trusted. It is used as a store of value. It is used as a medium of exchange. 60% of the global forex reserves are held in the form of the dollar, and 50% of the transactions conducted globally are in dollar. Now, what are the probable solutions for Trump? One, he is going for punitive tariffs. He is taxing the imports to reduce the demand for the foreign goods, or to force the foreign companies to set up operations inside USA, to set up manufacturing industries in USA. But it is fraught with risks. The risk will be that it will cause higher cost for the goods for the US consumers. It may lead to retaliatory tariffs by those countries from where the goods are imported, and it may even lead to supply chain disruptions. Plus, the trading partners, they may devalue their own currencies to counter these tariffs. Another option is to devalue the dollar. It can be done by encouraging other countries to sell dollar and to buy their own currencies. Earlier also, an attempt has been made to devalue the dollar. There was the Plaza Accord in 1985 between US, Japan, Germany, France and UK, who coordinated to devalue the dollar. Now, the outcome in the short term was positive. It led to the reduction in the trade deficits in the short term. But in the long term, it was a failure because Japan's economy stagnated. Japan's economy was export dependent, and it stagnated as the currency of Japan appreciated, and it led to the speculative bubbles in Japan. For example, the real estate bubble, the stock market bubble in Japan after that. So what are the challenges to such an accord? One, it is complex today. There are more countries involved today than in 1985. Plus, there is the China factor which is dangling, because China is the main trade and military adversary of USA. The scale of adjustment needed now will be much higher. There will be a massive monetary readjustment required. And Trump's approach is rather bullying approach. Bullying tactics may deter the global cooperation. So what can be the potential strategy of Trump? Probably escalate to de-escalate. He is probably using tariffs as leverage to force a dollar devaluation agreement, or it is causing uncertainty also. The global leaders' willingness to accept the economic pain for the long-term trade stability, this is also debatable. Thank you.